Hey everyone, welcome to Path to Victory. My name's Isaac, and this will be our first episode of a long-running 40k show. I'm going to be covering my competitive journey as a player. I have been listening to a lot of 40k content over the last year and a half, and I've just really enjoyed hearing different perspectives about people's 40k journey. And one podcast that I really enjoyed listening to was a podcast called Best General. It's a bit of an older podcast, but it was about a player based on his journey as a competitive scene and working to basically get Best General at a large event. I don't know, something about that podcast really resonated with me, just like talking about his journey as a competitive player and how he improved, and just kind of like watching how he grew from someone that wasn't like is super competitive to someone that like was able to win like a very, very large event. And I want a podcast to be somewhat of a reflection on that, just covering my journey as a competitive player, like both my successes and my mistakes as I try to improve and just get more into the competitive 40k scene and just make more connections, get better, and just become a 40k player that I'm um, happy to be. Each episode will be a little bit different. This is our first one, so it'll be more of like an introduction to the show about me and my journey as a 4K player. But each time we're gonna have a guest talking about the subject of the show and give their some new perspective for someone in a 4K scene that maybe like I don't have the same knowledge as. We'll also have different guests. If I go to an event, we'll have someone on like is also going to the event who also performed well there, or maybe didn't perform well, and like just looking to ways like how they can improve as a player. But without further ado, I'll go ahead and introduce our first guest here for the very first episode. If you want to introduce yourself, Sam.
G'day, fellas. My name is Sam Lemin. I am an avid listener of the Path to Victory right now. I'm here from episode 1, I can officially say. Whether voluntary or involuntary, I'll let you, the loyal audience, decide. But yeah, great to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Isaac.
Yeah, definitely seen you quite around. Stat Check Discord, which has been like a very popular place, probably one of the best places to get involved in like high level 40k talk. You've done fairly well for yourself in events, like you've done podcasts for in the past, and I feel like you'd be great first guest. Like really get into the groove here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can echo that sentiment of the Best General podcast, which Adam Abramowitz did back in the heyday of 8th edition, is fantastic. And even for people who are new to the game, I highly recommend listening to that podcast, as well as this one. Even though some of the terminology and some of the things aren't relevant today, like some of the, obviously, Blood Angels Codex reviews, I remember particularly weren't of relevant and interest, it was great to hear and listen back of the journey. And I'm looking forward to following this journey in of itself.
Yeah, really looking forward to it. So, episode's gonna be divided a few parts here. But the first part is just an introduction as myself as a player, and we'll also get some thoughts from Sam as his introduction to 40k, and really just like how we got into 40k as a game. Like, if you've never like heard of 40k, like it's definitely a really strange thing. Like these grown men like painting a bunch of miniatures and like collecting them and spending a bunch of money and taking the events just to spend hours a day just to lose and go home and then be happy about it. It can be a little strange without knowing what it is, but I been really enjoying it. I had before 40k, I had never played like any sort of competitive war game at all. Like I play D&D, which I'm sure a lot of people have in the 4K scene. Like love rolling dice there, getting into the groove, like trying to like see how to analyze and like do well in combat and stuff like that. But obviously, if you've been familiar with 40k, like it's quite different than D&D. Like there's not like you roll dice, but it's very, very different. It was towards the end of COVID, which I'm sure a lot of people had got into 40k over that time. You can see a lot of people getting to that, and I just stumbled across a YouTube video that talked about Warhammer, and like I thought it was interesting. I'm sure many people have heard of it. It's Bricky. He did his faction guide, like Warhammer factions. I watched all of them. I was like, this looks like a fun thing, and I bought like a $50 40k starter set, and it went downhill from there. That first box was just it was the ninth edition Necron versus Space Marines like Elite Starter Box had like the Necrons and Warriors and like Scorpex, the Outriders, and I got that, started building it, and then I went to my local game store, which is if you haven't been to 40k, that's like the best way to start getting involved. I went down to a place called Wizards Alley. They had a nice place downtown. I went in, and like first I was like, "Hey, you want to play my 500-point game where I played Necrons and Space Marines. It was like everyone's like, you can't really do that. Like that's not how it works. Like I realized like I had a lot to learn there, and I kept coming back and getting. I really got beat down because if you haven't been to the Midwest area, like there's a lot of very competitive players here, especially in the Wichita area. There's like a lot of like players that would like consistently go like 4-1, 5-0 at GTs and like take them down and for like best of action in the area. And I would just get like my head slammed in on them like game after game, and it was definitely like the Shark Tank started getting started. Yeah, I don't know if you had similar experience, Sam, like getting started out.
Absolutely, yeah. So I actually didn't start out competitively like you. Similar situation though. I did walk into a game store back in the day, so maybe this will be a very unique input for your listeners. But so as you may have guessed by my accent, I am from Australia, and one of the ways I got into back in the heyday was actually Lord of the Rings when the whole movies came out. They did a big magazine release for all the kids in Australia, and so around when the second or third movie came out. I'm not going to ask Isaac if you were even born then. I think he may have just been born, so I'm not going to date everyone. But so when they came out, anyways, like the magazines came out and what music came out, I thought they were super cool. And so went down to an actual Games Workshop store, or now they're rebranded to Warhammer, and got into it all. And so I did actually start, funnily enough, with Warhammer 40,000 back in the day. My initial first box I remember getting for Christmas, many years ago, was actually Chaos Space Marines. They were called a Battle Force box back in the day, rather than Combat Patrol or Getting Started. It was 150 Australian dollars then, and which was cheap at the time. And then now it's probably double, if not triple that. So, which is pretty wild. And yeah, I've sort of actually done the traditional path of sort of stop, start, stop, start. So as I headed into, I sort of did it during primary school, which is like primary school, middle school for all us American listeners. And then in high school, I sort of stopped in year 8. So senior year of middle school, essentially, or as I head into high school for us American listeners. And then I didn't get back into it until actually I finished university or college. So similar, Isaac and I were talking pre-show a little bit. Is I used to actually go attend university in Oklahoma, and so when I was finishing up university and college, I needed something to do between playing football and my final year of studies, and I came across my old Warhammer when I was visiting back home. So had my old Tyranid bugs and stuff like that, and I was like, "Oh, this would be fun to repaint." And then it started the slippery slope. So for me, it became my competitive endeavor, and it's been basically my competitive endeavor ever since. So, and I love it, and it's been a great thing for me to meet people and go to events and get that, I guess, intellect out of me to try and stress test my brain and improve as a human being and as a player at the same time. So, yeah, I can definitely echo that sentiment of those early days with points, some games being played, but it's definitely widely different now. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm probably like compared to like most guests I have on the podcast and most of my listeners, like I'm relatively new to 40k, like only about 3 years this February. Like there's models in 40k that are older than me. A lot of them are still being replaced, but Warp Spiders notably are a few years older than me, which they're getting their new kit. I think it's quite funny just like looking at see these people talk about 40k and it's like I wasn't even alive then, and there's people that's been playing for so many years. You're not quite to that extreme, but
Oh, yeah, I could still claim warp spiders are older than me. Okay, so I'm only 28. Okay, so I'm not. It's wild those warp spider sculpts are older than me. So I'm not that old. That the Games Workshop, the oldest Games Workshop kit is still in production. But I guess now that is no longer going to be the case when they get re-released now in the new year, which is very exciting. But anyways, we're here to talk about other fun things, not
yeah.
Eldar. Fuck them.
Uh, but yeah, just expanding on that point of just getting into the 40k, like my local game store, they ran like RTTs every month. I would go to those RTTs, I would lose, I would come back again, and still lose my like terrible ninth editions Ultramarines Dreadnought lists. Oh, those lists were so bad. But it was a really good time. Just like these players that were really good at the game that like knew what they were doing and just like slowly getting better and better. But it was definitely a Shark Tank. My first ever GT I attended, I went 1-4, which was not very good, I would say. But it was definitely a fun time, just like playing all these players that like were enjoyed the game, had these beautiful painted armies. I just really just got really motivated, especially after that event. Got really motivated to like start improving as a player.
Hell yeah, man. Yeah, so look, hey, you got to win. You can't complain too much about that. So some people go to the first event and don't win at all or get even close to winning. So
It's definitely a struggle. You like get past like that first win is like it feels so good. Just getting that first win, I really feel like you knew it better. I guess if you're just really thinking about like, I 40k is like kind of a weird, as I mentioned, like kind of a niche hobby, and I kind of just fell into it. But I've just found it has been like something that I can really express my competitiveness in a way that I really really enjoy. Like I've played video games for a long time. I'm sure most people have that would be interested in 40k, but I never really got competitively good at video games. Like I would always be like kind of a mediocre player. I just never like really got like super interested in being competitive. I never really got into any other like competitive board games or card games. Never really played Magic early in before this, which is like usually the one people think of like as a competitive nerd game. But I got the Warhammer and I just found it as such a satisfying outlet for like strategy and for hobbying and just in so many ways. It's a really really rewarding experience.
absolutely, I think Warhammer is an amazing hobby, and for me, it's become my all-inclusive obsession, to say the least. It was funny. It was a bit awkward. I recently had a work Christmas party, and obviously, when we're getting to know people, they're like, "Oh, what do you do? What do you do outside of work? What's like some of your hobbies?" And I just plainly said Warhammer, and like anything else, I'm like, "Nah, just Warhammer." And then I felt like a bit of a loser, but then I was like, "No, I swear there's a bit more to it." Okay, I paint and I hobby up. I love the conversion aspect. I love the collecting aspect and making my armies at least minimum battle ready, but also like to put a little bit more into it when I can. And then I also just love the community aspect of it and traveling to events when possible and playing with people who I've known for a long time, getting to talk to them, see how things are going, but also playing online in TTS. Has been really good for me and improving my skill set, but also b connecting to people all around this wide world of Warhammer, including yourself, Isaac, which we had the privilege of playing a little while ago now. But yeah, for me, like Warhammer has become my bread and butter hobby, which I obsess about in healthy and unhealthy ways. I try and stay more on the healthy side, but I've definitely dive into the unhealthy sides from time to time. So yeah, and it's just become my sole competitive outlet, which is great to get outside from work to stress test my brain and make myself feel smart and cool sometimes.
Yeah, it's definitely very satisfying. You come home with that trophy and it's like, yes, I'm good at this thing.
Wait, you guys are coming home with trophies? No, but I've had the privilege of getting a couple of trophies. I'm still chasing the luster of my first ever in real life GT win as the singles event, but I'll get there one day. And I know yourself, you did get it recently, so
Yep.
congratulations to you.
Similar to you, like 40k has definitely become like the thing I do. Like I've played way less video games. I do less reading, play less like other stuff. Like it's 40k. Like that is like the thing I do and put my time and effort into. And it's definitely really I've seen the reward of that over time. Just keep putting things in there.
Yeah, I guess I was gonna say, how do you find it across your friend group? So obviously you're a young Gen Z or young millennial, Gen Z, whatever the
Gen Z, yeah.
Gen Z generational gap it is turned up term called. How do your like friends react to it all? Do they see it as what the fuck is this thing, or are they more excited and inclusive about it? So, oh, they're interested in it because I am surprised, obviously, as someone quite young, to be interested in it. I know there's a couple of people around your age range who do get into it, but traditionally, it's one of, I guess, the stereotypical path is get in young, but then get in their late 20s or mid early 30s.
Yeah. It's really interesting. Like basically no one that have known has really been interested in getting into Warhammer. Like I've tried to like convince a few people like maybe play like a combat patrol game with me, and like they'll enjoy it, but like none of them really got the itch to like keep going. Like I'll tell people about it, and they'll usually be like, "Well, it's a cool painted model there. Like that's kind of cool." But never really got like my current friend group to really get into that like 40k like zone. So most people that I know that are involved in 40k, I met through 40k, and just really got connections through that experience.
It soon becomes like that. I'm sure you're aware, and other listeners can agree. Is once you get into 40k and start traveling to events and meeting people, your whole friend group becomes 40k people, which is not a bad thing. So it's a great community, and many people are so lovely and accepting and inclusive in this community, which is amazing.
Yeah, it's always so great to like see people like you play them at an event, like you get to know them, like know their name, and like next event you see them again, like hey man, how's it going? Like you get to really just like get involved.
100%.
But I think we really cover like all those things we need to, like just like explain like how we really got into 40K and like why and all that. So I think it's really like a good tradition is like talk about like some of the mistakes like as starting out as a 4K player. You lose a lot. You make a lot of mistakes as a player, and I think covering that and just not like ignoring it, saying like, "Well, I won a GT, so like I never make mistakes." No, I make a ton of mistakes, and learning how I improve from that is something I really want to cover in this podcast. Like, don't just brush over them like, oh, lost this game here because I made this something. It was the dice. You really have to like reflect on like why something went wrong. Starting out, you make a lot of mistakes. As I just briefly mentioned there, like when I first started playing, like my lists were very, very, very bad. And like learning that process of kind of like building good lists or taking it from someone that knows more than you is definitely like one of the most important parts when you're starting out in 40K. Like so many people are just like, they'll like come up with this brew and like get this thing. It's like, yeah, it's gonna be a really good list. They go to the first event and they're absolutely stomped. Like this because their list sucks and they just don't know why it sucks. Because learning that as a player is like one of the hardest things starting out. Knowing that you can't build a good list and like you're like 50 guardsmen and like two chimeras, Torox with like some a command squad in it. Like back in some days, like that's like be a really bad list. And recognizing when it's a good list is really hard. Like the same list that like looks super uncompetitive in the past could become competitive and vice versa. Like you never know like when that transition happens. And learning that is super important as you get into 40K and like one complete improving that competitive aspect.
100%. I mean, looking at the recent meta developments, I mean, what if you took this stereotypical Outlander Claw list that was very prolific during the last meta and you tried to play it a year earlier? People would laugh at you and say, "What the fuck are you doing, you absolute moron? Like, what's going on?" So, look, recognizing when that's good and bad, that's a whole other skill set.
It's also really important to understand losing is part of 40K. If you pull up to someone and they're better than you, generally they will beat you because they just understand the game at a higher level than you do. And especially starting out, it can be very demoralizing. Like I've seen a lot of new players, they get into the game, they'll keep showing up the RTTs and like going like 0 and 3, and it can be really hard. Like just like not understanding where you're going wrong and why you keep losing and why like it happens and like recognizing that is super super important. Not just like blaming the dice, which is something a lot of 4K players do. Like, I've made that. If I had made that 9-inch charge, I would have gotten an extra 8 points there, and I would have won because he wouldn't have been stolen my home objective. And when you don't realize, you should have never been at the point where you had to make a 9-inch charge to win the game. You should have been playing in a way where that doesn't come up. And sure, it can feel sucky, like you roll like 4 1s on your Custodian's Dreadnought and lose it to like some heavy bolters. Um, but variance is part of 40K. You just have to be aware and ready to like face that fact and not just like blame the dice, which I think is one of the biggest reasons I see people like fall out of 40K is they just start blaming stuff outside their control when really it's them as a player that needs to improve.
Yeah, blaming that, or it's like, oh, this army is busted, or this is bad, this is not good for the game. I would have won if you weren't such a absolute sweat lord piece of shit who's taking the most broken thing ever, right? Sometimes accepting your parameters or where the competition lies is a healthy thing to recognize, as well as accepting you're going to lose sometimes, right? No one in 40K is going who plays long enough is going to have a 100% win record ever, and no matchup is, oh yeah, it's just no matchup is always a 100% guaranteed win, and vice versa, right? So like, yeah, sometimes you even feel favored in the matchup, you feel confident, and you lose. It happens to the best of people. So, and but also on the flip side of it, it's great when you think you're in the jaws of defeat and you can snatch victory, which is great. So,
Yeah,
it's a hard lesson to learn though, and the best people have lost probably more times than you have won. So it's good
yeah.
to recognize.
No faction 40K has like ever had a 100% win rate. And like no faction in modern time has ever had like anything higher than like a 70%. And that's like the craziest meta. Like most factions now, you're within 60% win rate. Like there's always a chance you beat them. They're never just gonna run you over immediately. Like you can win that game. And recognizing that is super important to like improve as a 4Q player. Uh I've expanding on the point we mentioned like competitive play, like oh like you feel so sweaty, like you want to beat me. When I started out, like I'm sure this happened. Like even this is I've heard a lot about how it's even more intense before I started joining the game. Is like competitive scene of 40K was kind of like a pariah. Like people were like competitive 40K. Like what are you doing? Like it's supposed to be a fun game where you just play your fun list. Like why are you taking it so seriously? This is and like be kind of upset. Like competitive players are like ruining the game for everyone else. But I see that is completely changed, especially the last like few years. Like competitive 40K is like taken really seriously now. Like Games Workshop treats it like seriously. Players treat it seriously. So you're not gonna longer like walk up to like your local game store and people are gonna be like, wait, you play this competitively? Like, why are you doing that? Like, you don't get that anymore. Competitive 4K is taken
Yeah,
seriously and people understand it.
100%. There's definitely a much growing appreciation and acceptance of the competitive scene, and it's becoming way more popular than it was previously. And I agree. Like, obviously, the days of generally pick up games at your local game store are few and far between. But generally, you can go, oh, I would like a tournament mission game or a 2K game, and people understand what the parameters are regarding such that you'll use the balanced data slate, you use the latest Minotaur and Field Manual, and stuff like that, and accept any erratas and stuff like that. So it's, or you generally have like an accepted rule set, right? Some people will say, oh, we're going to use the GW layouts with these FAQs or the WTC layouts, etc. So it's really good that it's a much more homogenized community and people are more accepting and willing to play the competitive format.
Yeah. One other thing that like really has been like something that I've seen as a player like improving is kind of just like not listening to the wrong things. When you get into 40K, like the first thing you're gonna search up is competitive 40K. And, like the first thing you're gonna get is the Warhammer competitive Reddit. You get like your local Facebook group. You'll get like your faction Facebook group or like a faction Discord. And some of those can be really pretty good. Like there are some faction Discords that have like really good players in them that you really get like knowledge from and build off of that. But there's lost a lot of junk out there. Like there's people in like things like don't understand how the rules of competitive 40K work. Like I can name countless times. Like I've clicked on a 40K rules post and there's like a 50 comment chain of people arguing about like specifics of GW rule when like the FAQ is right there. And just making sure to kind of avoid those resources was like a huge like building point as a player and not like digging yourselves into like posting the competitive Reddit. Like, is this list good? When like most people on there like are not at a high competitive level.
Yeah, or like just understanding what they are, right? Like one of the biggest things I actually heard in the 40K sphere is paid content goes a long way. So when you pay for premium access to, say, a Discord server or a YouTube channel and stuff like that, sometimes it filters out the dumb takes and people who aren't willing to invest time, money, and energy into the game. So one of the best things I've found is like paid Discord servers. So previously, what is now known as Best in Tabletop and StatCheck, for example, I was two proud Patreons of, and still am for StatCheck, absolutely. So they're able to look. I pay a bit of a premium money financially for them, but the quality of content from there and the I guess the demographic of players you are interacting with are fantastic, and you get much higher quality content. Although, I mean, what are you talking about? The r slash Warhammer competitive subreddit is amazing for all your top tier competitive needs and tips and tricks, right? Surely, Isaac.
Yes. For some reason, I doubt that every person that picks a Reddit account knows exactly how to win at 40K. Yeah, but that paid barrier, I think is one of the best ways to like filter out the chaff and like just really get into like the people that really want to actually spend time with this instead of the person just like picks up Discord and writes about 40K and how it used to be better in ninth edition and blah 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 blah, which um is more common than you would think, to be honest.
Absolutely. And I think another thing as well, and this is absolutely to not shit on other content creators, is but recognizing what they're after in what their service offering is. So, for example, mini wargaming, amazing YouTube channel and community that does a variety of things. When they play their 40K games, they're not trying to use Games Workshop terrain or build tournament winning lists generally. Their audience is different and they're trying to go for a different level of competition and trying to make a nice, enjoyable, viewable experience. So similar to tabletop tactics, I know right now, I don't know if you watched them, Isaac. I haven't watched them in a long, long time, but they've had like a league sort of comp thing. But the level of battle report stuff there is not what you traditionally see, and they're doing things which aren't stereotypically the most meta competitive things. Whereas if you looked at, say, Vanguard Tactics or Art of War or like 6++ wargaming, like traditionally those would be much more tailored, tuned list, which are set with the parameters of it is a comp tournament game, and their advice is much more tailored towards the competitive scene, and as their audience is that.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Like you have to know what what the audience is for the person you're talking to. Started out, Aspect Tactics was a great resource. It really got me like with before like I got into like some of the better discords, it really got me a good way like to easily know what was going on in the game, like what day site meant, like how it affected the armies, what the news was, and like I really got to get into that, and it really helped me summarize things when I wasn't like I was kind of newbie, new fish in the water. But now I don't really see a need to use auto factors because like I already know things. I'll spend like an hour every hour when a new day slate comes out, and I'll read everything myself and understand it and talk to people at a high competitive level. I don't need someone to read off the PowerPoint for me. So I definitely respect those channels. Like they do great things for like especially starting out, but when you realize you're ready to start moving past that and moving to a higher level is really important. But make sure to support like other creators and do cool things. Like one of my favorite battle report channels is Play on Tabletop, which there is not competitive at all. Like they run like fluffy lists, but they have some of the best production out there for like battle reports in like the industry. Like incredible camera work, like incredible storytelling, like incredible like banter between the casters. And while I don't go there for like competitive stuff, that's a great way just like kind of like just sees like production of like 40K content.
How dare you consume non-competitive 40k content, Isaac? How dare you? Aren't you trying to consume and be optimized the whole time? No, enjoy the hobby, right? Like enjoy the stuff that makes is cool and interesting for you. So that makes complete sense.
Yeah. And the last thing really on this mistakes I can is like just making dumb mistakes. This is like covers multiple things, like during play, like just oh I'm gonna walk out here and do this thing, and then as soon as you pass a turn, you realize, oh I'm in front of all his guns. I guess I just lose my unit now, and just lose the game because of that. Like you make a lot of those starting out, and you still make them like in the current meta. Like I just many times I made like a dumb mistake in the game, like I should have won, and that cost me the game because I lost 5 points because I failed to cleanse the objective or I forgot to like deep strike a unit in the correct spot. Like that still happens. Definitely less now, but like you just got to be aware of, like those mistakes and try to reduce those and make sure those don't keep happening. So that's like the biggest way you improve fire is like removing those like huge mistakes that you keep facing.
100%. You know what my fucking favorite dumb 40k mistakes is I keep making sometimes is when I go into combat and I've like done all my charges, I'm ready and I'm excited to fight, is I don't take that 5 seconds to think, okay, which combat are they most likely to counter offensive or interrupt with? Sometimes I just go, oh, okay, let's go from left to right. And then I start there and I went, oh crap, I should have fought over here first because now he's going to interrupt and make my poor unit very, very sad. It's just one of my stupidest, dumb mistakes I have made in the past consistently, and I like to think I make far less of now. And I played in a tournament this past weekend. You know how many times I forgot to put my stupid Bivor Spore Mine down? More than once. Let's leave it at
Yeah,
that.
definitely like there's definitely areas that like lot more prone to accidents. Like putting a gun out and shooting something is pretty hard to mess up, but fight phase, uh, especially if you're playing someone at a high level, is incredibly hard. Like you have to like put thought into that. Like pilot and consolidation, heroic, which I'm sure has got many people that were not paying attention when they should have. Interrupts, like those are very important parts of fight phase, and people make a lot of dumb mistakes in the area. But just making sure like try to remove those and just not beating yourself up about them. Like you're gonna make a mistake. Don't think you're the worst player in the world just because you missed a charge or you forgot something. Like that's just a new way to improve. Like just keep working on that. Like recognizing that as I start off, like oh I should reflect on the mistakes, but not blame myself for everything. And like I lost because of this. Like you got to move on. Like there's gonna be more 40K games, more events. Like just gotta be ready to like work past that.
What 100%. I think just to add on a bit to that, when you make mistakes, or even if you lose as a 40k player, doesn't make you a bad human being. I know it may sound stupid, but sometimes when I lose, Isaac, I think I'm the worst human being ever, and I'm a disappointment to everyone and myself. And then when I realize it's just a game of 40k, just relax, it's okay. I don't know, it's such a stupid mentality that sometimes I carry. But look, it's okay to lose games of 40k, and you're not letting anyone down. Now, look, teams events aside and matrices aside, sometimes shit happens in a 40k game. So it's okay to accept those sometimes, and it doesn't make you any worse or less of a human being. So I know it's a bit of a deeper, more holy crap approach to it, but I mean, maybe someone else will reflect upon that and say, "Oh, it's okay."
Yeah, you just gotta move past it. Like also clear that it's like just making like dumb rules mistakes. Like I've definitely like starting out, you're gonna make so many rules mistakes, and someone's gonna correct you. You're like, I've been playing that wrong for like 20 games. I didn't realize like how the fight phase worked. Like I didn't realize that you could consolidate like onto the objective and wrap this unit and like rather than doing this. Like you're gonna make so many dumb little rules mistakes starting out, and that's fine. Like you're a new player starting out, and as you improve, you're gonna less and less will happen because you'll understand the game more and you'll understand it. Like the way I play now is like so different the way I played when I first started out because I understand the rules of the game so much more like in depth than I used to, and it's just a huge difference in like rules comprehension, rules understanding from getting from starting out to like how it is in the current day.
100%. I ditto everything you said.
And there's also sometimes you're gonna make a mistake like that is really dumb. Like one of my first events that I went to and I was actually doing pretty well at, I realized round 4 I had not put in a warlord trait that I was supposed to have on my list. I had used for the past 4 events and ended up like I could have got my first like good placing there, but like ended up having to leave the event because I made a large rules mistake, and that would have even though I was world hero supposed to be on there, I had the points for it. I played like I had it in the first games. I had not had it in my list, and that sucks. Like that can happen. Like I've definitely like made a mistake like that, and that was one of the, like the toughest days of 40k I had. Like when I was 4 out event, and that 4th round, I just couldn't play the next round because like I had cheated. Like they made a mistake there, and sometimes gonna happen. Like, but I think it's really important just like to keep moving on from that. Like that day was really rough for me. Like realizing I threw away like my first chance at like really good Warhammer, even though I was playing 30 Kazakin during Ninth Edition. Please don't cross crucify for that. I think it's really important just like continue to grow as a player and make sure that you improve yourself so you don't make those kind of mistakes. Like I look at lists so much more than I used to. Like not making sure like I didn't submit the wrong thing and make sure like I always am ready for that 40k game. I know exactly what's on my list, exactly what's on my opponent list, and I'm just ready to play without having to worry like silly mistakes like that.
Yeah, that's a good thing to do. Is always double check your list and make sure you got everything down. Even the best players do it, man. So there's been many infamous stories of people who won events or gotten close to the top and realized they made a big boo boo and had to drop for one reason or another.
Yeah. But just making sure you grow past that and continue to improve as a player. I think it's really important just to make sure to improve off those mistakes from the early days and make sure you don't repeat them. But I think we really built off a lot of the mistakes there, which is, it could be a little bit negative, like talking about how these things, but we grow past this. And I think this next part here, talking about how we've both improved as players from like these early mistakes starting out. Um, just look at my event results, like huge difference, like going from like a 30% win rate to like 70% win rate, going consistently going like 4-1 at events, winning a GT. Like I could not imagine like these kind of results like 2 years ago when I was going like I went 4-1 my last event. But it can happen if you really put in the time and the investment into 40k. You're gonna put and you're like not just wasting your time playing like pick up games at the store where you're not like trying to be competitive. Like if you're really putting in the time for that, you will improve at some point.
So I guess to add on to that, Isaac. So what do you think? Obviously, you said you invested a time and effort into it, but what was it that you felt you made you improve as a player? So you talked about how you reviewed lists a bit more thoroughly, and it sounds like you put in a lot of hours into Tabletop Simulator and games. But is it what in particular has made you improve? You think?
I think it's a mix of things. The first one is getting talking to better players. Using that paid walled services like StatCheck. I think since joining the StatCheck Discord has been like the largest improvements in like my 40k like knowledge and understanding. Just because there's so many like high level players there. Like if you go to a faction Discord channel, there's a high chance you're gonna talk to like one of the best players in that faction in the game. Like you go to Gene Stealer channel in the StatCheck Discord, you'll talk to Danny Porter, one of the best Gene Stealer players out there. You'll talk to Eric down from Australia, who's like no one talks about because people kind of look around Australia sometimes, but like one of the best GSA players in the world. Innis, like obviously one of the best GSA players in the world. Like you see these results, and you could talk to these top players and really understand like their mindset that you normally can't do when you're just like talking to your friend at the local game store. The next thing that really mattered was TTS, as you briefly mentioned. Uh, I like this week I just broke 3,000 hours in TTS, or about 2 years, and just basically using that just to continue to play games at the highest level has really been like again probably the second most like impact on my competitive skill level. Like I started playing TTS like right after that 1-4 event, and I've done so much better. Like you get to play against like playlists, like test them so much quicker. You get to understand what you want to collect as a player. You get to play the best players in the world. Like I've played like Liam VSL and Innis and like other like top players on TTS that I would have never had the opportunity to if I didn't use TTS as a software.
Most definitely. And I guess within TTS, when you started, did you like play in, I guess, the quote unquote generic Warhammer 40k TTS servers? And then over time, have you grown into more, I guess, dedicated leagues and with stiffer competition?
Um, I thankfully did not start in the TTS 40k Discord server. If you have not been familiar with TTS, that is they have done a lot of stuff there to help grow that, but unfortunately their pickup games are subpar. I would not recommend going for pickup game there, but they do have Alpha League, which is definitely a really good thing. If you should check that out if you're interested in TTS like events. But I started out in the Tactical Tortoise Discord server. I saw like him like talk about TTS, and I got into that, and that has been like was the best way for me to really start getting TTS. Was picking up games there, going to his like RTT size events, GT events eventually, and like going to his invitational circuit multiple years now, which has been a great time. Then moving on to the Tryhard Discord, which I'm currently a member of Team Tryhard, really a top tier competitive team in the UK, and also has a branch in the US. But going there and getting some great games. Again, keep raising stat check, but going there, find their events and their pickup games there have been always been great because the consistency top players. Recently, Team England Discord server. I'm not currently a member of Team England, nor am I a prospective member, but there's a pretty good collection of players there that like are practicing and really trying to get better and get onto Team England for WTC. So using that as like great practice has been a really good resource for TTS. But as like I've continued to focus more on competitive success, focusing on the higher level pickup games, maybe like less pickup games from a server like people that don't know what they're doing, and going to these servers that are like a higher concentration of good players has been really good at improving TTS practice quality.
Most 100%. And it's great that you able to play against some of the best in the world. And it's also funny, I think TTS, similar to when you pay a bit more for content, it's another barrier to entry that people, I guess only the most dedicated of players will play on the platform, right? You're not going to have Johnny or Jane go lucky, generally pick up TTS and want to play it and get better at it is by doing so. So it's another barrier to entry. And it sounds like if you were to apply for Team England, Isaac, I think some of your Boston ancestors would be very upset with you. But maybe you're just following your old school Team USA alumni, Nick Nanavati, and just joining the UK. So who knows?
Yeah, there has definitely been like times that you have bad experiences in TTS, but I would say the majority of the time it's a really good experience. People walk up, they'll know what they're doing, and you have to play that high level game and get that practice in. Like just TTS, I think, has also been one of the things that like has most improved my game in regards to game knowledge. Looking back at so as a player, like if I walk up to a table, I will have no idea what the other opponent's rules did. They could like tell me like this unit does like infinite damage, and I would have no way to know that. But playing TTS and then continuing to improve as a player and just knowing more has been such improvement in my faction knowledge. Like I've probably played basically every single faction on TTS at some point. Personally, like me playing them in like an event or like in a pickup game. So I just know and I'm aware of so much more of like what stuff does. And I think it's super important. Walking up to a table and not knowing your opponent's list does is so much worse than walking up to a table and know exactly what every single unit in their army does, as every strat, every enhancement, and just having that game plan ready in your mind. Like most of the time, if you've never played something before or in that faction, you're probably gonna lose just because you don't understand damage break points, what they can do, what tricks they can pull. But after that first time and just knowing their rules like inside and out, it's such an improvement. Like probably like the biggest way to improve as a 4K player is just knowing more about other factions.
100%. I wish in real life we could press one on our numpads and bring up yellow scribe on some of my opponent's units and stuff like that to look up their rules. But yeah, definitely the experience to get off meta lists or weird and wacky lists or even the meta lists is fantastic for us to get better at and understand what combos can be done and what the output looks like. So you can recognize them and learn from there. So I guess for you, Isaac, was one of the biggest improvements for you reviewing your own games and I don't know, saving some TTS games and going through the thought processes of doing what you did and what you did wrong?
That is probably one of the ways that I could probably most improve as a player is spending more time on that reflection. In general, I will usually look back at a game like, what mistakes did I make here? Like, why did I lose this game? But I really should improve. I'm like looking back at the actual like physical table and like practicing out and playing out events. Like I've talked to a lot of people that like have just they'll just play both sides of a 40k game and just like understand deployment and flirt ranges and just get a feel for it. Which I think is something that's definitely like useful in a way. Just like understanding how the game works. But I think it's definitely somewhere I could definitely improve. Is just like looking more reflective on like losses and improvements for game style.
I mean, I think there's no one size fits all approach. Some people really do love to reflect and visualize what the game could have looked like and what it does look like. I know you, from the sounds of things, you just like the game, man. 3,000 hours in Tabletop Simulator. Holy smokes, that is a shit ton. So kudos to you, and you play a crap ton of games. And so I think repetition for you is a massive key driver in improving your own performance.
Yeah, like I'll usually put in like like 30 something games of faction before I feel comfortable with like playing with it like in person to like success. Like Blade Jules, I went 7-1 Tacoma this year and I spent like 30 something games with like the practice lists like on the TTS before like I did that performance. Thousand Suns, I played like 30 games, 35 games with them before I won in GT with Thousand Suns. Like just being able to the repetition, like understanding exactly how much damage it's gonna do, exactly how to set up for maximum Overwatch, set up so like Magnus won't get shot around the corner. It's like there's so many steps and layers to that, and just continue to repeat that process has been like super helpful for me.
Most certainly. One of the best things I know competitive 40k players do when they're trying to improve is hire a coach. Has that been something that you've been part of your competitive journey at all?
I've not currently hired a coach. I definitely thought about it, but as someone who's definitely a bit on the younger side, Warhammer, like I don't have like a lot of the money or like some of the resources a lot of higher players have that like have full time jobs that can fund their 40k. So I don't really have the money at the point to like hire a coach. That's definitely something I look at. I definitely would recommend for someone that wants to improve. Just not in the cards right now to do a coach. But I definitely what I do like to do in lieu of that is talk to my opponents about the previous game and really get a feel for like what I could have done better, or like what they did wrong, what I did wrong, and just like talking to your opponent and just understanding like how they felt the game went and like what you could have done to improve. And even though like maybe like full coaching session, especially if you get a lot of high level games with like players on TTS or in person, like talking to them at the end of the game and just like understanding like where you went wrong or where they went wrong is like really good way to like improve that way, even if you don't have like an official coach.
Yeah, 100%. It's a free coaching session there, so you both are able to improve with each other and like talk through things and strategies and tactics. It's very good, and especially when you play one of those top tier players, it's great to do so. I know for myself in the past, I have definitely got coaching. So I'll claim the fact I was Anthony Vanilla's first ever coaching client. We both met on the Best of Tabletop Discord and going from there. So I'll claim that fact. And then previously as well, I got coaching from Jeremy Atkinson. So it's been great just to have someone to bounce ideas off and listen to. And sometimes, look, like some people in, I guess, the MMA world or other sporting endeavors, or even just life coaches, right? Or not life coaches as a role, but coaches in other disciplines. You're not going to always gel with a coach. I'm not saying that I didn't gel with Anthony or Jeremy; they're both lovely, but you can always learn something from them and get an understanding of something different. So I highly recommend if people can afford to do so.
Yeah. The more you put in, the more you succeed. Like you just put in that is you put in money into like into coaching services or into like Art of War subscriptions or into like um paid events, like you're gonna get a lot more out of it than if you just like try to ride free. Like there's definitely a difference there. I see it improve more and more as like competitive players got uh more involved in the scene and like trying to share instead of just like having their own little circles. Like people be more like excited to share their successes and like how they did, and like these like competitive podcasts like keep popping up with like these top tier players and it's really sharing like their improvements like to the public. I think like making sure like support those and like put money into them and it's like really help improve your play.
Speaking of podcasts and content that you consume, do you have any recommendations, Isaac, of some podcasts or content that you personally found allowed you to improve as a player?
Yes, I do. Stat Check. Again, we've talked a lot about them, like the Discord and their hosts and coaches and all that. But they have incredible podcasts and really getting to that high level competitive scene for teams on the Into the Matrix podcast, Singles with the Man Show, um, or even stats that you can offer from their website. Like incredible resources from that show there. Fireside Podcast is also an incredible thing if you're especially interested in the European scene. David Gaylord and Vic Vijay, both incredible players that play high levels in singles and teams. So getting the hitter's perspective on the meta, that's something I really enjoyed there.
Hey, I think if you're going to say the UKTC is a part of the European scene, you're going to have a bit of a Brexit following from some people, okay? But no, obviously, part of the UKTC meta, the UK meta is absolutely insightful. And yes, there is a European meta insight there as well, for sure, when they travel for teams events or play them naturally.
Yeah, there's a lot of smaller faction podcasts out there. Like, I do know there's a this. I've listened to some of the GSC faction podcasts. I believe it's Ascension Day.
Shout out, Gabe.
Pretty good show there. Been enjoying that. Six plus plus is also a really good one. They have they'll bring on a lot of guests and a lot of a broader show as long as they also do stream games as well. We really talked about a lot of things there. Like there's still many ways to keep improving play we haven't discussed on here. Like again, as I discussed, I'm not super great at reviewing games and documenting them, which I think are two things that like you definitely do to help improve as a player. As they're all my goals to keep improving in that front. Um, but there's a lot. As long as you're willing to put the time and effort in, you can improve as a player. Like you don't have to be the player that always loses the game and always get that wooden spoon. If you really take the time and really like listen to other players and don't just like play by yourself, you're gonna improve eventually.
Yeah, and so one of the things you did talk about there previously as well, Isaac, was that coaching was a little bit of a financial barrier. And look, obviously, I understand being in college and university, there's only so much disposable income you have. Do you find that because obviously we in the US it's a pretty big fucking country, hey? So it's not the easiest thing in the world to travel from event to event to event. Do you find there's quite a bit of a financial barrier for you to, I guess, attend regional and local events, or hell, like, I mean, collect a fucking 2K army, right? It's not getting any cheaper by the day.
Oh yeah, there's definitely struggles getting into that, but there's been ways that often like there are events I can drive to within a few hours that happen here or there because of my ability to college, and I also have a home down in Kansas. I'm able to kind of go to events that are like near Kansas or near Washington State, so like I have a little bit of freedom there. But yeah, it definitely can be a lot of money. Like if you get into this, it is like a monetary heavy hobby. You have to be prepared for that. But I've also, this it can a 40K collection is also pretty expensive, but I use TTS to really help with that. Like I will usually just when I purchase an army, I will purchase a 2K army list, like for that faction, like built off of what I've learned from TTS for that faction. So like I'm not just picking random models like, oh, this looks cool. Like I know exactly what I'm looking for, so I kind of reduce like the excessive cost there. Other resources like 3D printing can really help. 3D printing has basically like has 1/8 the cost of my GSC army, which is one of the most expensive factions in the game to collect. So that is definitely something to consider as a way to help bypass some of those large expenses. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to do. It is a money intensive hobby, but there are ways to try to help it get around that.
100%. I know for me, I have definitely become a connoisseur of the 3D print, and I do enjoy alternative models and sculpts to afford said hobby. Look, it's not cheap in Australia. A GSC army will cost you a mortgage on a house, essentially. No, it's maybe not that bad, but it's pretty fucking expensive. And AdMech, my gosh, that is definitely a mortgage on a house. And I know others in the Australian region, they're definitely, instead of, I guess, collecting 2K armies, they become faction specialists and have deep collections for which they are able to flesh out and pull from. So I know, so one of my, I guess, relatively locals, Simon Gojkovic, so he is an ex-Team Australia player, a very high-level player who's been playing for a number of years. He has 4 factions. He has Elder, Drakari, Tyranids, and GSC. And he has, at minimum, 3 of everything with max of everything. So he collects deep, and then he's able to flesh out wherever he needs to, however he needs. So it allows him to compete at the highest levels at any one time, at any time. So which is great for him. And I know is one way to alleviate his own financial pressures and stuff like that. So, whilst still being a competitive player, right? Because you like to think at any point in time, the Eldar Codex should be competitive, and then between those other three factions, they're deep enough and special enough where he can play them whenever he needs to. So,
Yep.
yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear, though, that for yourself, Isaac, as someone who's a youngin in the hobby, you don't find the financial barriers to entry being too cumbersome. Whereas I know in the past can be or could be for some people.
Yeah, 3D printing has gone a long way. Like, if you look at what I 3D printed, like, at the very start of my 40K, compared to, like, the GSC prints I printed yesterday, like, it's insane the amount it's improved in the last few years. Also become a lot more accepted. People are like, a lot of times there's, like, people like, well, you 3D print something? That's crazy. Like, people are aware of 3D printing that. Like, they support it and think it's cool. There's a lot of, like, great alternative sculpts out there if you're not just trying to, like, just copy GW. Like, one of my favorite 3D printing creators, Napking. He has like incredible alternative Terminator sculpts, and also some really good Necron Overlords and Lich Guard flayed ones. Like if you go to like these alternative like designs, you get some really good stuff out there. I definitely could improve by like fleshing out factions. I'm definitely more of a gold wide player. I currently own, I believe, 8 factions right now if you count Black Temple, Dark Angels, and Blade Angels separately. But yeah, it's really fun just like try to play more stuff, more variety. I really enjoyed that. So like probably could be better for a wallet if I consolidated down just like 1 or 2 factions, but going that wide depth is something I really enjoy currently.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something to be said though about having a breadth of knowledge regarding factions. So I know you talked previously about having at least played each faction at least once, or even against each faction at least once, allows you to improve your skill set as a player. So obviously, look, if you only played Tau as a competitive player, you would go, "What the fuck do I do when I charge and stuff like that?" Look, I know Kyle Grundy may say by playing Tau you'll become a great melee player. Nah, I disagree. No, I'm kidding. Love Kyle. But I think if you played Tau generally at a competitive level, you wouldn't flex your muscles in the charge and fight phase nearly as much as you would by playing listers, world eaters, and vice versa, right? Definitely in world eaters, you wouldn't understand the shooting phase nearly as in depth as you did if you played Tau, or a balanced army which used both assets and relied on both of them to achieve the goal.
Yeah, definitely. Like Tau players don't it can be sort of like pile consolidation that the depth in that. And if you're a role player that pick up shooting army, it's realizing like, wait, if I shoot this gun first, also my other gun can't see it. Like you don't really have that melee. You just charge in and you fight. So like having like some of those like learning different parts of the game is really important, like a fighter breath there. But that's really like the body of the podcast here today. We're going to end a little few closing notes. Talk about my long-term goals with the podcast here. So I'm going to try to have an episode of the podcast come out roughly every once or twice every month. Just talking about my competitive journey and how I'm improving, what I'm doing to grow. But I do also some like long-term goals as a player. Like I want to like continue to reach for like higher goals and not just like settle like this like 1-4 small GT winner. If you're aware of StatCheck, you probably also are aware of their ELO system, where they basically rank players like based off how well they perform. And while it's not a perfect system, like no 40K ranking system is, I've really enjoyed looking at it and seeing my improvement. I would really like to improve to top 50 in the US, which I think is very achievable at the current rate. I have been gaining ELO, and then as a much longer term future goal, I would love to make that top 25, top 20 United States players, and just really be able to show like how I've improved as a player.
That sounds like some amazing goals.
I also really like try to win a larger event. Like I have won GT, but it was on a smaller side, only like 30 players. I've gone performances at super majors. Like I've gone to like 1-7 at Tacoma. Like I've had quite a few 4-1 finishes. But I really want to improve my consistency as a player. Make sure to eliminate some of those 3-2 finishes that I've had at a few events, and really win a larger event. Like I want to win like a 100+ player event and just know that I am good enough to take home a trophy at one of those big events. My final like this is a much longer term goal, maybe like 5 years in the future. I don't know how long it would take, but I would love to definitely get on Team USA. Like I really enjoy teams and want to continue improving that aspect, and eventually making the Team USA like academy team or maybe even the real team in much distant future. I would love to see that happen. So that's really just like my 3 really long term goals to try and approach, improve my elo, winning in larger events, and going for Team USA. So this podcast will help document that. And as I see, like just as I work up as a player, continue to reach some of those longer term goals.
That sounds amazing, Isaac. Are there some any? I guess are there anything in particular that you think you need to improve on in order to reach said goals? Like, are there some areas of your game that you need to improve on or understand better to do so, or do you think it's just a matter of time until that happens?
I think I need to work a lot more like on positioning. Sometimes like this is a mistake in mouse make. I get a little sloppy. Like, it's the easy game, don't have to worry about it, and then realize you placed yourself like within an 7-inch charge distance of the world leader terminators, and you're like, uh oh. To make that 7-inch charge, I just lose the game. Try to make remove those like smaller like positional mistakes. Look at a higher level, the game state, and like looking to the future. Like this is definitely hard for a lot of people. Just like looking into what's gonna happen and like keeping track of that score. Like I make sure to always track score in tabletop battles, but still like making sure like you're looking ahead at like round 2, round 3. Like how is the game state changing? Like am I in the lead or am I in the points lead now? But like I'm going first in supply drop, so I get like a guaranteed 15 points. So like just being aware like those point thresholds and like well I'm winning by like 10 points now, but they're gonna get 15 points bottom of 5. So I'm gonna lose even though I thought I was gonna win. Making sure to eliminate those instances from happening and just being more precise and consistent as a player.
That sounds great. Those are some great goals to work towards and things to improve on. And I look forward to listening to the journey.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming on today, man. I really appreciate you being the first guest of the show that will hopefully continue on long into the future.
Hell yeah, man.
I would like really like to make sure that this is one like a premium podcasting experience. Just working on the when you're watching, you're gonna enjoy the video and the audio experience here. And just going to the end here. Just thank you everyone for your time here, Sam, and thank you everyone for taking the time to listen to our ramblings on competitive 40k. It's been a pretty good time. The next episode, hopefully be coming out within a week or so, which will be episode talking about LVO, the biggest, well, I guess the current biggest 40k event in the world, which I'll be attending this January with along with quite a few other top competitive players. On that show, we'll have a few other players that are attending and try definitely got to go for that win there. Thank you very much for watching. If you want to hear more from this in the future, make sure to subscribe to this podcast on YouTube and any podcast feeds you enjoy listening to. If you have any feedback for the episode, I think we should change or can improve on in future episodes, make sure to leave a comment and leave a like if you enjoyed. Below, you will find a link to the Discord, which for this podcast, where you can talk to other people about the episodes, leave questions in there if you have anything for me, and also attend my TTS events that I'm currently running. In a few weeks, we'll have a Teams event that will be running through TTS. So we do have a way for you to find team members there if you don't have anyone, or if you have a 5-man team that wants to get more competitive practice for top players, feel free to stop in and play some high level TTS. Again, thank you guys very much for taking the time to listen today. Have a great rest of your day. Bye bye.